The restaurant smelled of citrus polish and cold steel when Michael B. Jordan walked in that afternoon. The air conditioning hummed low, carrying the scent of roasted garlic and seared steak from the kitchen. He wasn't wearing anything extravagant, just a charcoal jacket, crisp shirt, and the quiet confidence of someone who'd spent years mastering how to take up space without demanding it. But as soon as he stepped through the glass doors of Hawthorne, the hum in the room changed. Conversation slowed. Forks paused midair. The hostess, a woman with pale lipstick and an overtrained smile, froze for half a second before collecting herself. "Good afternoon," she said, voice almost chirpy. "Do you have a reservation?" Michael smiled softly. "No, but I think there should be a table." She tilted her head, glanced toward the bar, where a man in a navy suit whispered something to a waiter. "I'm sorry, sir," she said too quickly. "We're fully booked today." Behind her, several empty tables reflected the soft light. Michael noticed. His smile faltered, but he said nothing. "Maybe I can wait," he suggested. The woman hesitated, her eyes flicking toward the manager. The man in the navy suit approached, adjusting his tie. "Can I help you?" His tone wasn't welcoming. Michael explained, calm and polite, but the man interrupted him with a hand gesture. "I'm sorry, sir. We have a private event today." The words were smooth, rehearsed, but something cold hid beneath them. A couple at the bar glanced over. Michael could feel their stares. He heard a faint laugh from the corner. The air thickened. He felt the muscles in his shoulders tighten, his heartbeat steady but strong. "Private event," he repeated quietly. "Understood." He turned away, his reflection following him in the glass. Calm face, clenched jaw, eyes that said more than his lips ever could. Outside, the air smelled of rain and exhaust. The city noise rushed back, raw and unfiltered. His palms felt damp. For a moment, he leaned against the brick wall, inhaling the metallic scent of the street. He wanted to say something, to walk back inside and confront them. But instead, he walked away. That night, he couldn't sleep. The laughter in that restaurant echoed in his mind, every syllable like a drip of cold water. He had dealt with this before. Subtle dismissals, polite cruelty, the performance of civility. But something about that afternoon burned deeper. Maybe because he had worked for years to build something of his own, to rise above the quiet ceilings others set for him. He thought of his mother's words. "Your dignity isn't what they give you. It's what you keep when they try to take it." The next morning, Michael went to the construction site where his latest project stood, a sleek building framed by glass and light. His partner, Dana, noticed his silence. "Rough day?" she asked, wiping dust from her hands. "Just people showing you who they really are," he said. "Again." She looked at him, then back at the rising structure. "You built more than they'll ever understand." He nodded, though it didn't help. That evening, he drove past Hawthorne again. The lights glowed warm behind the tall windows. Laughter spilled into the street. He parked nearby and just watched. It was his restaurant. He had acquired it quietly through a holding company, as part of a larger expansion project. He hadn't introduced himself to the staff yet. He wanted to see how they ran things when no one was watching. Now he knew. Inside, the same hostess greeted guests with perfect smiles. The manager gestured grandly near the bar, laughing with a group of regulars. Michael imagined walking in again, imagined their faces when they realized. But revenge wasn't what he wanted. It was dignity. The next day, he did walk in. The same time. Same jacket. Same calm steps. The same hostess looked up and froze. Recognition flickered. Maybe she had read the email from corporate that morning. Maybe the new owner's name finally meant something. "Mr. Jordan," she stammered, her voice suddenly smaller. "Welcome back." The manager approached fast, smile stretching thin. "Good afternoon, sir. We're honored to have you here." Michael didn't answer immediately. He let the silence hang. The air felt charged, every sound amplified. The clink of a spoon, the rustle of menus, the soft gasp of a waiter who just realized who he was. "Yesterday," Michael said finally, "I was told there was a private event." The manager's face flushed. I deeply apologize. There must have been a misunderstanding." Michael looked around. There were plenty of empty tables. "I assure you," the man stammered, "that won't happen again." "No," Michael said. "It won't." His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The words landed heavy, deliberate. The hostess swallowed hard. Somewhere near the bar, a glass cracked faintly under too much pressure. Michael continued, still calm. "I'm not here for revenge. I just wanted to see what kind of place I'd invested in. Now I know." The manager nodded rapidly, sweat shining on his temple. "Of course, sir. We'll take immediate action." Michael raised a hand. "Action isn't enough. Understanding is." He turned toward the other guests, their curiosity thick in the air. "The way you treat people when you think no one's watching, that's who you are. Remember that." A silence settled, deep and uncomfortable. Even the kitchen noise dimmed. Michael's gaze softened then, not angry, just steady. "Now," he said quietly, "I'll take that table by the window." The hostess nodded, eyes wide, and led him there with trembling hands. When he sat, sunlight spilled across the table, catching the faint shimmer of his cufflinks. He ordered a simple meal, coffee and a sandwich. The coffee arrived hot, rich with the scent of roasted beans. As he lifted it, he felt the warmth against his skin, the quiet rhythm of his pulse steady again. Around him, the air shifted. The staff moved with new care. The guests watched with uneasy respect. But Michael didn't revel in their discomfort. He simply sat, drinking his coffee, feeling the weight of the previous day lift from his shoulders. Dignity wasn't about applause, it was about calm in the storm. When he finished his meal, he left a note on the table. "Kindness is policy now," it said in simple handwriting. Outside, the city moved as always. Cars passed. Wind carried the smell of rain and bread from a nearby bakery. Michael walked away, jacket collar turned up against the breeze. He wasn't thinking about revenge or power. He was thinking about the quiet lesson he'd left behind, how respect isn't requested, it's reflected. Later that week, the restaurant issued a statement about inclusivity and training, but Michael didn't read it. He didn't need to. He'd seen enough to know that real change didn't start with apologies. It started with recognition. A month later, when he returned again, this time with friends, the same hostess greeted him with genuine warmth. The same manager approached, respectful but calm. The energy was different. Maybe because they had learned. Or maybe because they had seen in him not anger, but grace strong enough to shame their ignorance. As he sat near the window again, sunlight dancing across the glass, Michael thought about that first day, the looks, the laughter, the quiet humiliation. It still stung, but less sharply now. In its place, something stronger grew. The certainty that dignity isn't something anyone can take from you. It lives in how you stand, how you look back, and how you choose to rise without striking. The coffee was the same, but it tasted different. Richer. Warmer. Like truth after silence. When he left, the staff thanked him, voices low and sincere. He smiled, nodded once, and stepped into the golden afternoon. Somewhere behind him, the restaurant buzzed again, changed, maybe just a little. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. The night was heavy with humidity when Michael stepped out onto his balcony, the city lights flickering below like restless thoughts. He leaned on the railing, feeling the cool metal under his hands, listening to the hum of traffic and the distant sound of laughter drifting from a nearby rooftop bar. It had been 3 weeks since the incident at Hawthorne. The restaurant had since become a quiet symbol in headlines and social media threads. A lesson in humility, some called it, others just another story that would fade. But for Michael, it wasn't just about a restaurant. It was about the mirror it held up to everything around him. He had seen it before, in auditions, in boardrooms, in conversations disguised as compliments. Racism didn't always scream. Sometimes it smiled. And that was what stayed with him. His phone buzzed on the table behind him. It was Dana. "Press conference tomorrow," the message read. "You sure you want to do this publicly?" Michael stared at the screen for a moment, then typed back, "I have to." The following morning, the air smelled of rain and coffee as he arrived at the downtown media center. Cameras flashed when he entered, the soft click of shutters echoing in the lobby. He was dressed in dark gray, no tie, clean lines, simple and deliberate. Reporters whispered as he passed, some curious, others skeptical. Inside the conference room, the air conditioning hummed too loud. A few executives from his company sat to one side, nervous energy pulsing through their body language. Dana approached him quietly, handing him a folder. "You don't have to prove anything," she said. "They'll twist your words if they can." "I know," Michael replied. "But if I don't speak, someone else will fill the silence for me." The cameras came alive as he stepped to the podium. He didn't read from notes. He just looked out at the crowd, letting the moment settle. "3 weeks ago," he began, voice calm but firm, "I was turned away from a restaurant I own. Not because of my reservation, but because of my reflection." A murmur rippled through the room. "This isn't about me being an actor or a businessman," he continued. "It's about how we treat people when we think no one's watching." His voice didn't rise, but it carried weight. "Racism doesn't live in the loud moments. It lives in the quiet ones, the polite dismissals, the hidden glances, the unspoken decisions. The ones we excuse because they're not violent enough to notice." He paused, looking at the faces before him. Some shifted in their seats. "The truth is, every system that claims equality still hides inequality in its walls. We see it in hiring, in service, in judgment. I didn't want to shame anyone. I wanted them to see themselves. Because recognition is where change begins." The silence after that felt almost sacred. No flashes, no whispers. Just the weight of his words hanging in the air. When he stepped away, the reporters erupted with questions, but Michael didn't stay to answer. Outside, rain had begun to fall, soft and steady, coating the sidewalk in silver. He walked to his car without an umbrella, the water cool against his face, the sound steady in his ears. That night, the clip of his speech went viral. Some praised him for grace, others accused him of performative virtue. But the truth lay somewhere between perception and intent, and Michael didn't bother to chase either. He stayed quiet, focused on the next steps. Over the following days, his company launched an initiative for service industry training across all their establishments, mandatory programs addressing bias, inclusivity, and respect. It wasn't a headline move. It was a foundational one. And yet, the resistance came fast. Internal emails leaked. A few investors expressed concern about politicizing the brand. At one meeting, a senior executive, a man named Harris, spoke with a rehearsed calm. "Michael, with respect," Harris said, his fingers drumming lightly on the table. "We all appreciate what you're doing, but maybe we should let this settle down. The public forgets fast. Why stir things further?" Michael looked at him, the fluorescent lights above casting sharp lines across the man's neatly combed hair. "You think this is about publicity?" he asked. Harris smiled tightly. "I think it's about perspective. We can't fight every battle." Michael leaned back in his chair. Some battles aren't chosen, he said. They're handed to you when someone decides what they see when they look at you. Harris hesitated. I just mean, we can't risk alienating our clients. Clients or conscience? Michael asked quietly. The room went still. No one answered. When the meeting ended, Dana caught up with him in the hallway. You're pushing too hard, she said. You'll lose people. Then they were never with us, he replied. Change doesn't need everyone. It needs the right ones. That night, he drove to the edge of the city where the skyline faded into quiet streets and small diners. He parked near an old jazz club he used to visit before fame. The sign flickered weakly above the door, the sound of a trumpet leaking through the cracks. Inside, the air smelled of whiskey and history. A few patrons sat scattered, lost in their own silences. Michael took a seat at the bar. The bartender, a graying man with tired eyes, recognized him instantly. Didn't expect to see you here, he said, pouring a drink. World's loud right now. Michael nodded. That's why I came. The man smiled faintly. They'll forget in a week. That's what they always say, Michael murmured. But maybe this time they won't. He sipped slowly, the warmth spreading through his chest. On stage, a saxophonist began a slow tune, melancholy, raw, human. It reminded Michael of the nights his father used to play old records in their small apartment, saying, Son, dignity's the only suit that never tears. The memory cut through him, soft and sharp at once. He stayed until closing, listening, thinking, breathing. The next morning, his assistant forwarded him a letter, an anonymous message from a restaurant worker at Hawthorne. It read, I was there that day. I saw what happened. I didn't speak up. I've been thinking about it every night since. I just want to say I'm sorry. You made us see what we were blind to. Thank you. Michael stared at the letter for a long time. It wasn't grand, but it was real. One person had seen. That was enough. Over the next few weeks, other restaurants reached out, asking to join his training initiative. Small steps, slow but steady. He didn't announce them publicly. He let the actions grow quietly, the way seeds do before breaking soil. But the backlash didn't stop. Some media pundits mocked him, calling it celebrity guilt. Others accused him of exaggerating. One night, during a televised interview, the host, a middle-aged man with a slick tone, smirked and said, Michael, don't you think maybe you're reading too much into this? I mean, they didn't know who you were. Michael looked at him, silent for a long moment. The lights were bright, the cameras rolling, the audience waiting. That's exactly the point, he said finally. I shouldn't have to be someone for them to treat me like a human being. The room fell still. The host blinked, trying to recover his rhythm. Michael's voice remained calm, but the edges of steel were there now. Every time we excuse ignorance, we feed it. Every time we stay silent, we sign its permission slip. The interview went viral that night, again dividing public opinion. But Michael didn't check the comments. He went for a walk instead, through quiet streets still wet from rain. The air smelled like asphalt and the faint sweetness of night-blooming jasmine. His reflection followed him in the windows, steady, thoughtful, older somehow. He thought about all the people who had been turned away long before him and never had a microphone to speak. He thought about his own silence in the past, the times he had smiled through insult just to keep peace. And he realized peace meant nothing if it came at the cost of your self-respect. The conflict deepened in board meetings, quiet tensions building behind polite words. Investors withdrew, a few deals faltered. But new partners appeared, people who believed in more than profit. Dana called it a necessary purge. Michael called it clarity. The public eye shifted again, as it always did, chasing new outrage. Yet under the noise, real change began to hum, a slow, patient rhythm, the kind only truth could play. And still, there were nights when Michael felt the weight of it all, the exhaustion of being strong, the loneliness of always standing tall. He would sit by his window, city lights flickering against his glass, and think about the faces in that restaurant, the way they had looked through him before seeing him. It haunted him, not as anger, but as understanding. That's what prejudice did. It made people smaller than they could be. One afternoon, he returned to Hawthorne unannounced. The air inside was different now, warmer, more human. He saw diversity in the staff, genuine laughter, the soft chaos of people being themselves. The hostess, who had turned him away, approached cautiously. "Mr. Jordan," she said, her voice steady but sincere, "we've been trying to do better." Michael looked at her for a long moment. "That's all anyone can do," he said gently. "Just keep doing better." As he left, the sun spilled through the tall windows, lighting the floor like gold. The city outside buzzed with life. He walked through it quietly, no cameras, no speeches, just a man moving forward with the kind of strength that didn't need to shout. In every step, there was both weight and release, the tension of the fight, and the peace of knowing it was worth it. Because dignity wasn't something you won once. It was something you carried, again and again, through every room that tried to forget it. And Michael carried it still, unbroken, steady as his own shadow under the fading afternoon light. The morning light bled through the curtains like diluted gold when Michael woke up, his mind already alert before his body moved. The city outside murmured in its usual rhythm, car horns distant, a siren fading somewhere far away. Today was the day he had to decide whether to stay quiet or act one last time. The controversy had settled into silence, but it was a deceptive kind of quiet, the kind that came before something shifted again. Hawthorne had recovered, his company had stabilized, and the initiative had expanded far beyond what he'd imagined. But inside, Michael felt unfinished. There was something hollow in victory when it wasn't shared, something restless in justice when it didn't heal. He brewed coffee slowly, the hiss of the machine grounding him. The smell filled the apartment, rich and bitter. The taste reminded him of long nights after auditions when he wasn't famous yet, when he was just another man fighting to be seen. He looked at his reflection in the dark window. Same eyes, but older now, steadier, aware. A knock on the door interrupted the silence. It was Dana, holding a folder, and a look that said she knew what was coming. "They want you to speak at the summit," she said, placing the papers on the table. "All the investors, the board, the media. It's the biggest audience you'll ever have." Michael nodded. "And they want me to make it clean, right? Polished. No hard edges. You already know that," she said softly. "They want you to inspire, not accuse." He smiled faintly. "Inspiration without truth is decoration." Dana exhaled. "Then tell the truth, but be ready for the fallout." He looked at her, grateful for her steadiness. "I've lived with fallout my whole life." The day moved slow, each hour thick with thought. As he drove to the summit, the skyline glittered with sterile beauty, glass and ambition, rising endlessly. Inside the conference hall, the air was cold, recycled through vents that hummed above the heads of hundreds of suited figures. Cameras lined the back wall. The lights burned white on the stage. Michael sat quietly until it was his turn, hands clasped loosely, his breath steady. When the announcer called his name, he stood and walked to the podium. For a moment, he said nothing. He just let the silence breathe. "We talk about progress," he began finally, voice low but resonant, "as if it's a straight road. It's not. It's a climb with your hands bleeding and your hope bruised." The audience shifted, murmurs rippling. "I've been told my whole life that dignity is something you earn," he continued. "But that's a lie. You're born with it. The world just tries to convince you otherwise." He looked out at the crowd, faces polite, unreadable. I own restaurants, companies, properties, but that doesn't mean I've escaped prejudice. It just means I can afford to watch it from the front row. The people serving your tables, building your offices, cleaning your spaces, they live it every day. They don't get cameras or apologies. They just get silence. The room was still. Even the hum of the light seemed to fade. The problem isn't hate, Michael said, his tone sharpening slightly. It's blindness. The quiet kind that wears a suit and smiles while stepping over someone. A few executives exchanged uneasy looks. Some of you want me to make this speech neat, he said. To talk about how we're improving, how we're learning. But improvement isn't comfort, it's confrontation. His words hit the room like slow thunder. We can't move forward if we keep pretending our hands are clean while others do the washing. A man in the front row adjusted his cufflinks nervously. Michael noticed. This isn't an accusation, he said, softer now. It's an invitation. To look. To see. To start again. He stepped back from the podium, letting the silence stretch until it became its own language. Then, without waiting for applause, he left the stage. The walk down the hallway felt longer than it was. Behind him, he could hear scattered claps, polite at first, then rising. But he didn't turn back. Outside, the air was sharp, the sunlight blinding. He took a deep breath, the kind that fills more than lungs. It fills something invisible inside. Dana met him by the car. You know, that speech just lost us half the board, she said. That it found the half we need, he replied. For a moment, neither spoke. Then she smiled faintly. You always knew when to burn the bridge. Only when it leads nowhere, he said, opening the door. The weeks that followed were turbulent. Investors withdrew again. Headlines exploded with opinion. Some called him brave, others reckless. But beneath the noise, something unexpected happened. Restaurants across the country began adopting his training programs voluntarily. Young entrepreneurs cited his speech as a turning point. Employees wrote letters, telling stories they had never told before. It wasn't a revolution, but it was movement, and that was enough. Still, Michael felt the fatigue of carrying the weight of a symbol. Fame had always been heavy, now it was heavier. He started spending more time away from the city, in a small house near the coast. The ocean was his reset, the waves unjudging, the air unfiltered. Some nights, he would walk the beach barefoot, the sand cool and damp under his feet, the sound of surf like a steady heartbeat. He would think about the restaurant that started it all, how something so small had cracked something so big. One evening, as the sun dipped low, his phone buzzed. A message from the old hostess. Her name was Lila. I left Hawthorne, she wrote. Started my own place. We hire anyone who wants to work hard, no questions, no assumptions. We're not perfect, but we're trying. Thank you for making me see. Michael read it twice, then 3 times. He smiled, a small, quiet smile that wasn't pride but peace. Months later, when he returned to the city for a charity event, he stopped by her new restaurant. It was small, tucked between 2 buildings, its windows glowing warm. Inside, laughter filled the air, the smell of spices and fresh bread wrapping around him. Lila saw him immediately and froze, then smiled with disbelief. You actually came, she said. You invited me. I didn't think you'd show. You didn't think I'd eat? He teased, and they both laughed. She led him to a table near the kitchen. We're still learning, she said. But it feels different here. People talk to each other, not at each other. He looked around. The energy was genuine. It wasn't perfect, but it was human. You built something real, he said, because you believed you could change. She hesitated, then said softly, You did first. The words landed somewhere deep. For a long time, Michael sat there, the noise of dishes and conversation blending into a kind of music. He thought about all the battles fought quietly in hearts and minds, the ones that never made headlines but shaped everything. When he finally stood to leave, Lila stopped him. "You changed that restaurant without tearing it down," she said. "You showed us what grace looks like." He looked at her, his expression calm. "Grace isn't soft," he said. "It's steel wrapped in silence." Outside, the city lights flickered against the dusk sky. Michael walked slowly, the night air cool against his face. Somewhere in the distance, a musician played saxophone on a street corner, the notes drifting through the noise of traffic. He stopped for a moment to listen. The tune reminded him of his father again, of those nights filled with dreams and warnings and love. He felt something loosen in his chest, a release, maybe, or closure. The next morning, headlines ran his speech again, calling it "The Talk That Changed the Table." He didn't read them. He was already packing for another trip, this time to visit community centers where his initiative had reached young people starting their own businesses. When he arrived, the rooms were filled with energy, faces from every background, eyes bright with ideas. One young man approached him after the session. "Mr. Jordan," he said shyly, "my dad was fired years ago for standing up to his boss. He thought it didn't matter. But when you spoke, he watched the whole thing. He said maybe it wasn't too late to try again." Michael smiled. "It's never too late to stand up. The ground's always there." The young man nodded, eyes wet. "Thank you." That night, alone in his hotel room, Michael stood by the window, looking at the light stretching into the dark horizon. He thought about how change works, not in explosions, but in echoes. The restaurant had been one echo, the speech another. Each person who chose to see differently added their own. It was slow, fragile, and beautiful. He whispered to himself, almost without sound, "That's enough." But deep down, he knew the work was never done. There would always be another door to open, another silence to break. Still, he felt lighter now. He had carried his dignity through fire, and walked out still holding it. That was victory enough. The last image the city gave him that night was a reflection, his face in the glass, framed by the light of 1,000 unseen lives, all moving, all struggling, all rising. He smiled faintly, turned off the light, and let the darkness hold him, knowing that somewhere, someone else was walking into a room where they'd be seen, really seen, because he once refused to disappear.